We've got most people continuing to stream in. Really excited for this one. We've been doing these monthly. We're going to continue to do more and more career features every single month with who, in my opinion, are pretty high profile pipe hitter type people in the vet community. One thing that we've continued to do is have civilians on each episode or on each fireside chat to make sure that we are not completely unaware of our blind spots. So I'm Wyatt Frazier. I'm one of the two partners at Sit Reps, Kyle Eberly, obviously the other that everyone knows on Instagram. So Kyle's on Instagram and is kind of the brains behind the overall strategy. And then I run the LinkedIn. So I frequently get comments about trolling Ben Kelly or other people. So you're welcome if you enjoy those. I've found that a lot of people like those. But you did not come here to listen to me. Although I do work in lower middle market private equity operations for a company that is very private equity, incredibly boring. We do utility metering and billing in Southern California, Texas, Colorado. So I do mostly corporate development for them, meaning I look for other companies to buy and diligence those companies and then help do the integration. So tonight we have several other people whose careers are much more illustrious than me. I will let each of them go through their own backgrounds. Each of them has a pretty fascinating background, and they're all been very successful in their own right. So I will first start out with Matt Martel, who I think is the most interesting man I've ever met doing sit reps, and I've met a lot of different people. So Matt, can you please detail the wild worlds, starting with I'll tell everyone because you won't. You were a Marshall Scholar, graduating, was a second in your class at West Point, before going on and doing some insane stuff. So Matt, I'll start with you, and then we'll move into Travis after Matt.
Thanks, Wyatt. You're a master of memes and hyperbole, apparently. No, it's great to meet everybody. Matt Martel. So I was West Point '07, Army aviator, got out in 16, went to HBS for business school. Out of business school, I was at Bain for a couple of years. Majority of the time there was on their private equity ring fence. So repping out commercial due diligence work and tech-enabled services, healthcare, a few other things. Um, After that, spent a few years in emerging markets. So I was helping a drone delivery startup scale in Rwanda in East Africa for about a year. Um, and then spent a couple of years in Northern Iraq doing sell-side investing. So helping institutional investors enter the Iraqi market, and then a little bit of investing work in Jordan and Lebanon after that. Currently running a lower mid-market field services company out in Chicago, part of Orion Services Group, which is a Alpine Investors backed field service roll-up. So if any of you are in a CVS somewhere in the regional Midwest and you clog the toilet, it's likely one of our technicians coming out to fix it. So we cover about 10 states, all commercial field services, so plumbing, electric, and general carpentry work. And yeah, I'm excited for this. Excited to meet you all, other panelists, and chat private equity ops.
All right, is Travis on?
Yes, sir. Hey, folks,
Hey,
I'm
Travis.
Travis. Nice to meet everyone. Also looking forward to this. I'm glad Wyatt and the team set this up. It's a good career. I'm looking forward to talking about it. Navy, I was a ROTC at Northwestern, joined the submarine force. Pale white skin tone was well earned, guys. Spent about 6 years, got out in 2014, went and got my MBA at Berkeley, and then joined McKinsey in their Denver office. So I did a bunch of frontline operations transformations type work, worked at a bunch of coal and gas plants. That's kind of where a lot of the nuclear engineers end up if they join McKinsey. So did that for about 4 years. I enjoyed it. Good folks. I won't say anything bad about McKinsey. Ultimately didn't particularly love the slide deck part of the job, and joined a very small PE fund based out of Denver called Lion Equity Partners. To help them build out their operations practice. And so they basically hired me to try and figure out how do they do corporate carve-outs more effectively. And so corporate carve-outs, which is where I work now as well, Small division from a large corporate parent. Maybe they acquired some company way back in the day. It hasn't worked out. They want to get rid of that business. We would acquire the business and try to build a standalone company around it. So it actually required that we candidly build a business. Most of the time we were getting half of an asset or half of a company. And so I've been doing that for the last 5 or 6 years. I recently made the jump from Lion Equity Partners to a slightly larger PE fund based in LA called Pacific Avenue Capital Partners, where I'm a managing director in their operations practice as well. So I can tell you all about, I would say, the classic PE ops path. I can tell you about consulting to PE ops. And today I oversee 3 portfolio companies. They span a wide variety of industries. And so I have no specific sector expertise. I'm more of a generalist. But my job is to make sure that the companies that we carve out get stood up and can operate as a standalone business.
By the way, Travis, I really appreciate the thoughtful placement of the hard hat and vest behind you.
That was just for you, Wyatt. I figured you'd like that.
You know, making sure as you call your operators that they see that. So we'll dive into that a little bit more later about how much how dirty people can get their hands and why vets are probably a good fit for this. Next up, Steve Carroll. Are you here, Steve?
I'm here.
Steve, so for those that are not aware, Steve has been a follower of SitReps on LinkedIn. One of our mutual friends, his name's Ben Manning. I'll plug his company. It's called Eat Counter. If you're at Target, he makes great frozen food that has high protein content. So Ben texted me one day and said, "Hey, how do you know Steve Carroll?" And I said, "I have no idea who that guy is." And he's like, "He likes all of your memes and he's not a vet." And I'm like, "Well, who is he?" And he's like, "Oh, this guy was a buddy of mine at Walmart who left and told me some wacky idea about starting a plumbing electrical PE roll-up." And I was like, "Good luck, man. Like, you have some construction stuff. Like, I don't know exactly what'll happen." And he's like, "Pretty soon." I'm like, "So how's that going?" And he's like, "Steve tells me we have $1 billion right now and we're scaling to 10." And it's really pretty amazing to see Steve. How humble you are, Steve, and second, I just appreciate that we have a civilian that unprompted followed the page, seems to really love vets, and has been crushing it in PE ops. So we'll let you now introduce yourself after I kind of hopefully didn't butcher too much of the intro.
No, that was awesome. Thank you, Wyatt. And if I ever decide to sell a course, I'll be sure to get your approval first, knowing the memes to follow. I'm not planning to sell a course, but I love the trolling. I get a kick out of it. Yeah, so I grew up. I am a civilian, but a ton of respect for everything that each one of you have done for our country. My grandfather served as a Marine, so I grew up hearing a little bit of the stories. So just tons of respect. Thank you all. I went into construction because I wanted to be out in the field building stuff, and did that for a number of years before I went back and got an MBA and then ended up at Walmart. And that's where I met Ben Manning. Lived in Arkansas for 7 years, and then pretty much the entire time I was there, I was trying to hatch this plan to get something like Kelso up off the ground from scratch, because I didn't have the pedigree of a lot of the great things you guys are doing. Candidly, I really just felt like my only shot was to go build something from scratch. And we started with one business in Phoenix, one acquisition, and we just completed our 26th acquisition a couple of weeks ago. And we're focused on commercial. I should have clarified that with Wyatt. He was nice enough to shout out our business, but we are focused on commercial and industrial, a little bit different than home services, but maybe a little similar to Orion at the same time. So excited to answer any questions and be as helpful as I possibly can to each of you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Steve. Last, Bryan Varuska, are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, so Brian's follower, West Point football star, and probably the most well-known amongst vets home services company, I think, out there at Apex. But Bryan, I'll let you take it from here, but and detail your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Wyatt. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I was Matt's classmate. If he was fifth in his class or second, I was about 500 spots behind him, I believe. So, but yeah, '07 West Point grad, into the infantry for about 6 years following graduation. Got out in 2013. Decidedly had a very hard time finding what I wanted to do after the military. Hopped around a few different operational roles across Chicago, where I'm from originally. Started up my MBA at Kellogg and decided I'm just going to finish that up and go into consulting for a few years and just kind of get back to neutral and kind of decide what I wanted to do next. So I did 2 years with Accenture Strategy in change management and human potential, which was actually not too bad. I didn't really mind consulting relative to some other stories you kind of hear. But Apex called me when they bought a $6 million HVAC business in Indianapolis, where I was living, and said, "Hey, we're starting this new business called Apex. We need someone to help us start running these businesses. Would you want to be a general manager of an HVAC business?" To which I figured it made some sense to take a chance and did that. So yeah, for those of you that know Apex, it's grown pretty quickly. I started as a general manager in that business, slowly took on more and more territory, oversaw Indiana, Michigan for Apex, and then Ohio as well. And then since we've, I don't know, 10x revenue in the last 3.5 years, I've moved up to the regional team where I now oversee the staff and a good portion of the operations for the Midwest. So I've been doing that for about the last 3.5 years. And yeah, it's been a great experience. So I'm excited to answer you guys' questions and have a good conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brian. So first question I want to ask everyone, we hear about PE ops. It seems to be something that when I was at Wharton and when I talk to my friends, especially my friends that are in consulting, banking, other careers that you'd probably call kind of transitory careers, things that people are not looking to do forever. You hear a lot about PE ops, and in my opinion, it's normally talking about, the industries that I think all of you are kind of in, more quote unquote boring businesses, very dependably profitable businesses, non-software businesses, although, that's obviously a huge piece of private equity. But when we think about PE ops, why is there so much energy right now amongst these kind of roll-up strategies? We'll start with you, Brian, and go backwards. What is happening right now, and maybe what's the future in your opinion, next 5 to 10 years in these kind of home services, blue collar type roll-up strategies?
Yeah. The really easy answer, the PE textbook answer is that it's extremely fragmented, which is true, right? I mean, that's not just the thing you say when you say you want to start a PE company or something like that, but it is true that it's fragmented. Now, that alone, does that cause you to want to, is that why the focus is on there? It's not necessarily, in my opinion, in my experience, it's that it's fragmented and they're really not overly complex to operate. They're simple, but they're difficult. And what I mean by that is it's hard, it's competitive, but to actually get these businesses operating in a way that can be profitable they're not overly complex P&Ls. And in many ways, the HVAC, plumbing, electrical industries, which I operate in, the residential piece, they're actually really highly commoditized. I mean, an HVAC system is an HVAC system. So how do you really differentiate yourself? And what I think we've found, and why people are speaking to people with our backgrounds in this, is because if you bring in someone into a commoditized industry like HVAC and you bring business savvy, you bring people leadership, you bring critical thinking, and a bias for action, you can actually turn these around fairly quickly. So, that's why I think we find our people on this call find ourselves a lot in these conversations, is because we have a unique skill set that really relates well to it. And because if you plug us into this type of fragmented, recurring revenue type model, it's pretty easy to build process and drive forward. So that'd be my opinion on that.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I think that's great, Brian. What I also think is happening is, and this kind of goes back to our original thesis of what we were trying to do, is a lot of the tech stuff is super volatile. I had a bunch of tech stuff I was trying to do before Kelso, and it was kind of hard to really lean into it with a bunch of debt and expect to really go build anything. So then when I shifted my career, my entrepreneurial career anyway, to the baby boomer audience of small business owners, I just found there's so many, like Bryan said, there's so many folks that are just started a business in the 80s or 90s and they need to retire and they didn't develop a succession plan and they were probably too scared to train somebody internally to take their job. And so there's this massive succession plan going on across thousands and thousands and thousands of industries when it comes to these blue collar businesses. And from my standpoint, we've done 26 acquisitions. We've grown our business. On the commercial side, it's a little more technical than the residential side, but it's a lot of relationships. And so part of my long-term plan is to develop a leadership development program so folks can step into running a $50 million business and take over the relationships that the owner has over time. And it's a bit of a grind. So you need someone you can trust that can go build and take over those relationships, but it's not going to happen overnight, at least on the commercial side. So a lot of folks retiring and just the investor community is realizing, oh crap, we need a lot of leaders really quickly.
Thanks, Steve. Travis, what's your take?
You know, I don't play a bunch in the roll-up space, but at the end of the day, these are high free cash flow, low cyclicality businesses where the name of the game is just getting shit done. So from a standpoint of why is it attractive to PE ops, you know, that getting shit done is a big part of the equation in these roll-up strategies. So makes a lot of sense, even if it's not the area that I play in. And for the investors in the crowd, that, you know, high free cash flow conversion is really, really attractive.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add there. What I will say, you know, like these are people-intensive businesses. If you can come in, manage them well, and connect with people, and you know, bring solid leadership to them, like there's almost immediate value from that. Which is why, you know, firms like Orion, firms like certainly Apex and Alpine firms really like the vet community, you know, for these businesses. One thing I will say looking ahead is, you know, these are deep end markets. They're competitive. But you know, they're still deep. But I do think, you know, we're going to see a shift from a lot of quote unquote quick wins, easy wins on these roll up plays to valuing operators and really valuing value creation, especially in the era of more expensive capital, you know, that we're going into. So I personally think it's not only a good time to be in this space, but it's a really good time to be a good operator in this space. And then we're going to see more of an emphasis on folks, you know, on this call, bringing value to these companies. Rather, it's almost like a power shift from investors to operators.
And why, if I could add something there, because the future here, I think, is an important question that I didn't really answer. Is I agree with Matt 100%. I would say that as these roll-ups and other PE ops businesses get more competitive and there's more and more of them, it's also an important time to be really picky on who you decide to join. I think in the future, as this space gets more and more saturated, we're already seeing businesses that were booming 2 years ago that are just trying to bail really quickly because everything was great during COVID and they were riding the high horse. And then, oh crap, we have to actually operate these businesses now and they don't know how to do it. So be really picky as you go into these businesses of who you partner with. And there's plenty of people out there that know what they're doing that want great leaders, but don't jump at the first opportunity that you get, is what I would add there.
Yeah, it's definitely a messy space. You know, there was a business that we went to acquire. During quality of earnings, I noticed a weird discrepancy between payroll and bank accounts. And I called the owner and I just said, why is your bank account showing payroll being wildly different? And he's like, I'll be honest, I don't know what my payroll is. I just put $25,000 every month onto QuickBooks. It was a different number than that. It was higher, and it turned out to be wildly different. So we start pulling this thread, and it turns out that this guy had no idea what exactly he was doing. And you get into a lot of these businesses, and it's kind of like that. and it can be a lot scarier than people I think realize. So I appreciate that comment, Bryan. I think the question that obviously comes from everyone is private equity. When you say that, especially to people that are familiar with the investing side, the compensation is obviously very rich, and you have everyone from, you know, my buddy that's at KKR talking about the CEOs there getting $500 million bonuses, you know, all the way down to even just people that are able to get into investing roles. Those are very difficult for vets to get, so we're not really going to focus on those. But I think a lot of people look at private equity operations as a chance to maybe get a slice of that pie. And compensation is obviously not something that people talk about, you know, out loud often. But I would just love to hear, you know, kind of the structure for a lot of people. They wonder what, you know, it's not the cash compensation, obviously, that I think makes private equity or private equity operations attractive. So I'd love to have you guys kind of break down, maybe starting with Travis, you're on the investing side, how you look at compensation for operators, and maybe explain exactly how that works. And then maybe we'll jump to you, Bryan, you know, just kind of break down so people understand really when they get into private equity operations, what should they expect in terms of, you know, not necessarily putting a dollar amount on it, but how they should expect to be compensated. Because it's not just, you know, a base salary like we might be used to in the military. So Travis.
Yeah, happy to field at least the first part of that. So just for a little bit of background, so I'm a PE operations guy on the fund level, so slightly different, right? You know, I work with the investors to diligence the companies we're going to invest in, similar to what Wyatt was talking about, actually execute the carve out, so extract the business from the parent company, hire a bunch of people to do the back office work, make sure we've got a strategy, get the work done, and then help drive the operational improvement for the business. You know, most of the time when we buy these companies, they just have a bunch of problems. They've been buying the same materials for 20 years and they've never taken a look at the price or the rate card. So like that's the work that I'm doing, and I'm doing it over multiple companies. So I've got 3 separate portfolio companies that I oversee, and I've done diligence on 50 or 60 companies. I say all this to say, you know, my compensation structure, I have a base salary. It's not bad. It's nothing, you know, that would shock anyone, you know, kind of working in industry. I have an annual bonus that's kind of tied to the base salary. Again, nothing that would shock anyone. The big part of my compensation is tied to the performance of the private equity fund. So I have carried interest in Pacific Avenue. If the fund does well, I will get a big payday. If we sell a company for a lot of money, I have a small share of the proceeds of that kind of at the fund level. And that's where a lot of the money comes from. And that's why PE and PE operations, if you can get that carried interest at the fund level, or even just tied to the companies that you're overseeing, it becomes a really good thing for you, because you're tying to the performance of an industry that has historically done very, very well. So that is not always the case. You know, I'll echo what Bryan said. Be very careful who you sign up with. You know, not all PE funds are created equal, and not all PE funds value their operating team the way that, you know, I would like to believe that the companies I'm working with are. So it's important, read the fine print, understand what you're signing up for. But if you find a really good fund and you're able to get carried interest either at the fund level or at least with the portfolio companies you're working with, it's kind of the perfect situation. Like, you are directly tied to the performance of your business. You are directly tied to helping your business succeed. There is no misalignment between myself and the chief executives that I work with. We're all driving for the same thing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many pretty PowerPoints I create. You know, my compensation is tied to the performance of the business, period, end of statement. And that's really why PE operations is so attractive to many of us in the space.
Yeah, Bryan.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. That was good. That was good, man. A lot of good stuff there. What I would add there is, I would say a decent portion of people I talk to are on the side of disappointed with the cash comp that you generally see. I mean, you're making, you know, post MBA consultant base salaries, like right out of, like, that's kind of what you're going to walk into as a GM generally, for what I've seen at least. Now that's just your base salary. You know, you're going to be about 50-50 base and bonus. So you have a chance to make a lot more, like Travis said, based on the performance of your business. But that's really to keep the lights on and pay your mortgage and take your kids' soccer and stuff like that. If you're going to take a chance on a business like that and kind of, you know, eat a little bit on the, on the cash comp side, you have to, one, be okay with that, and two, the LTI, the long-term incentives, need to be a major part of it. So how we've generally seen it be done, at least how we operate at Apex, once you earn through performance, and you get an equity grant essentially, which has some future value that vests over a certain period of time. So that's a base case scenario based on the performance of Apex in general and the performance of your region. That grant can be worth more or less, but it is a target for you to hit that vests over that 5-year term. That has been by far the biggest piece of my compensation since I've been at Apex. And that's sort of how we're structured and how we'll continue to be structured going forward. I don't want to make everyone think that you don't get paid well, because you certainly can. But if you think you're going to walk into a $300K base salary as a PE operator, I would probably reset expectations there.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, you can go next. You've been an investor and an operator. Would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, it's similar structure, what I've observed, right? It depends on the fund you enter, depends on the company, but generally you're going to see the structure that Travis and Bryan described, like a base salary, some sort of bonus, usually tied to EBITDA performance or OP performance, and then some sort of equity or equity-like vehicle, whether it's a sale bonus, whether it's a carried interest, profit share, something like that. I compare it to at least a lot of the folks who do kind of a role like mine, company president or like a GM role. Their alternatives would either be a search fund, and generally we recruit a lot of folks who otherwise would have done search, or something more corporate. And so it's a spectrum of upside and risk, right? I think the nice part about PE ops is you get not as much upside as a search fund, but you mitigate a lot of the downside risk that you'd face running a search. And there's just, I'd say, the weighted value, especially compared to how competitive search is right now, I'd put greater weighted value on PE ops at this stage, just in terms of likelihood of capturing some upside. I would say for the level of commitment necessary to run these businesses, because these things aren't complicated, but they are grindy. And so for that level of commitment, it's got to be life-changing money on exit. That base isn't going to carry you. Even that bonus isn't going to carry you through some really tough stuff that you face running these things. It's, as you look at funds to join or firms to join, look hard at that equity piece, because that's what is going to keep you going and keep your family going when this gets really dicey. So I would say it's almost table stakes to have that as part of it.
Yeah, I'll finish up with Steve, and I'll just kind of tweak the question a little bit, since you founded a fund, without being a banker or coming from a big investing role. So when you look at it, and maybe for people here that think maybe someday I want to start a fund, I know there's people that are participating that are currently operating. What does that look like when you decide to start a fund, trying to figure out with your LPs and with investors, how to structure compensation, how to structure your equity pieces?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really cool part of what we're doing, especially if you're in a business that's growing rapidly. I think there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. If I could hit on the original question just briefly before I jump, if that's all right.
Of course. Yeah.
I personally think there's a little bit of a career build that you can leverage inside of private equity or private equity backed companies, that you can accelerate your career. If you were to go to any of the companies mentioned, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get experience in things that probably going to be hard to get if you go to Walmart. I was at Walmart for 7 years. Great experience, and I was able to move up and do different things. We grew a business from 17 million of EBITDA to 250 million of EBITDA, and nobody cared. If you do that inside of a PE-backed organization, you're going to have a career, a lifetime of opportunities. And to me, I think the greatest opportunity is when you're at the highest level in the organization, either raising the money, sourcing the deals, and operating the deals, or somewhere very close to those things. So for me, it's a build where wherever you decide to go, learn as much as you can, get paid probably okay, probably similar to what you would make if you went to Accenture, like some of the companies we've mentioned, but the opportunity to either stay in that firm and climb higher or eventually leave because you have operated for a PE-backed company and go to another firm higher up in the chain, more options, more, it may be carry's harder to get inside of the opcos, but at least some options. There's jumps in there where you can make life-changing amount of money, even if it's not the first one. I'm a huge advocate for just get in there, get a job at Alpine, Orion, any PE-backed company, so you can just learn as much as you can as it's growing. If you can get to a C-level position, I think there's absolutely material life-changing amounts of money you can make if you operate well. I think you can make a good amount of money inside of inside of the opco level roles, and that's just a great place to start. So I'm a huge advocate for just go start there. If you do have enough of that background and you have had some wins, I think you open up opportunities for independent sponsor level activity where you can raise money, you can source your own deals, you can lean on your network for people to work with you, or finding off market deals in whatever industry you choose. And that, I believe, is where you can make material wealth for not just yourself and your family, but future generations too. And I just hope everyone comes away from this with the feeling that, hey, if you get a chance to go work inside of a PE-backed company, that's not your last job. You don't have to be there forever. You can use that to go to the next and the next and the next. And hopefully you find somewhere like Bryan and Matt where they can grow for a really long time. But even if you don't and you do get stuck, being a part of a PE-backed company is just such a great learning experience that you can build upon.
Yeah, would definitely agree. Steve, real quick, just a vocab point for those watching. Could you explain what an independent sponsor is?
According to me, it's probably a newer term, so I might butcher this a little bit, but you're basically somebody who knows how to find a deal, inspire enough confidence with investors to operate the deal, either as the CEO or as the PE operator, and then get that PE group to manage and help you start a new Apex, a new Orion. It can be done. It's hard to do if you haven't run a PE-backed company before. And the only reason why I was lucky enough to be able for this shot is I partnered with my friend who we've been friends with since 4th grade. We met at Kelso Elementary School. That's where our name comes from. We met in 4th grade there, and he was in private equity as the private equity guy, but he was the number 2 guy in a smaller firm. And he just got tired of his boss yelling at him for like 10 years straight. And I got in his ear enough to convince him to go start Kelso from scratch. And we were able to leverage his background in raising capital and put on your sales hat and sell. You can sell an investor to back you at that point. And that's what we did. We were kind of independent sponsors. We didn't have a fund. We found a deal in Phoenix. I was going to move from Arkansas. I moved from Arkansas to Phoenix to run it. I put on your sales hat, I guess. If you can convince somebody to do it, you're an independent sponsor and you have a lot more leverage to negotiate for economics for yourself and compensation for yourself. And then it's just up to you to go perform.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, pretty awesome story. Would advise anyone listening to follow all of the speakers, but Steve's put out some interesting content lately. Next question, PE roles. A lot of people on here are either currently in an MBA program, vets, or they're in industry. And first question I'll hit to you, Travis. Do PE ops roles value MBAs, maybe other advanced degrees? And the second piece of that, what industries do people have do people typically succeed coming from? Or, reason I ask that is if you're in an MBA and you're thinking, maybe I can't recruit immediately for a PE ops role, maybe I can't find that immediately. Where should where do you have value coming from?
Yeah. Look, I don't think anyone values the MBA for the MBA. It's kind of the things that follow after the MBA that really matter. And so, look, that first roll out of the MBA is an important one. I can't think of a single person I know who works at kind of the fund level in portfolio operations that came straight out of the MBA and joined PE operations. It just doesn't happen, right? So I left the MBA, I joined McKinsey, I went to a variety of industries, but I worked in kind of frontline operations transformations, and that was useful, both carve outs and non carve outs. That was what ultimately was useful to the PE fund that found me, right? Hey, we've got a strategy. We've actually got to go do the strategy though, right? Like, hey, we're talking about leaning out the manufacturing organization at this company, or we're talking about, trying to reduce the inventory levels at this business because it's just too high and it's eating up too much cash. Figuring out how we go do that, that's kind of the secret sauce. And so ultimately my time at McKinsey, I would say, was effective for two main reasons. One, I was able to communicate very effectively on how do we take a strategy and make it an action plan. I was used to taking a McKinsey strategy study and saying, all right, guys, like, what do we go do with this? Like, how do we turn this into 50 initiatives that we can independently track and execute? So that was really helpful. That was a good experience. I think the second one is just being able to communicate a fairly complicated problem into something a little simpler to understand. I mean, most PE strategies are not complicated as a thought. They are complicated in an investment memo, and they are very complicated, as a PowerPoint deck. And so how do we take that and actually go work with the company to understand why did the PE fund invest in you? And what does that mean as far as the things we have to go do, whether it's procurement turnaround, SG&A reduction, or kind of right sizing the organization, going and driving more sales performance. Like, what are the things we're going to go do? And then getting really rigid in that kind of go get shit done mentality throughout the next 3 to 5 years. So for anyone looking to get into the space, I think coming out of the MBA program directly into PE ops is not going to happen. I would say the vast majority of my colleagues who work in PE operations, they either come from a consulting background or they come from a general manager in industry, and specifically in an industry that's relevant and kind of had to go do that thing. So PE-backed portfolio company executive roles is a really clear path into PE operations, or a relevant consulting career track where you did kind of frontline operations transformations is the other major way into PE operations.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. I'll go to you, Bryan, next. I know Apex is unique that it does have some MBA students coming into not C-suite type roles. But maybe could you talk about if someone's weighing maybe a decision between Apex and Accenture, McKinsey, Bain, what would you recommend for them if they say, look, in the future, I want to be a C-suite at a PE-backed company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I agree with a lot of what Travis said, in that, the MBA should be more about what's it for you? What skills are you developing? How are you bettering yourself? For the military guys, look at like MBAs as Ranger tabs. Like, do they give you a little bit of credibility when you show up day one? Sure. Do you learn something from them? Sure. But it doesn't make you a better platoon leader. No one thinks you're better because you have a Ranger tab. No one thinks you're better because you have an MBA. It's about doing the thing, as Travis said. That's really, really important. I think to say, if you're in your MBA, you do it if you've done the experience, if you had the experience beforehand. Yes, you absolutely can. The way Apex does it is we're developing a general manager and training program where you come in, you sit at a business, you might be a trades manager for a period of time, and you kind of get your feet wet that way, which is a really great path to learn the business in a low risk environment, and be developed and have a chance to kind of move up into that general management or market president role. So that's the path that we take. But I just think you need to be cognizant of what you've done before, and if you're prepared to take that next step where I mean, these are fragile businesses. You can break them, and you need to be prepared to manage them in a really thoughtful way on a day-to-day basis. I again second what Travis said. Consulting to me is a great path to take post MBA. You're in both situations, you're walking many times into a business where someone, and you're telling someone how to do what they couldn't do the last 5-10 years, and that's why you're there. And it's a level of communication. It's leading through influence versus authority, which is another military thing you have to get rid of. So I love the consulting background, or again, some sort of P&L or people management experience. It's just going to set you up for success too. It's not that we're trying to be exclusive and keep people out. It's just better for all parties involved. So that's kind of the approach way I would look at it.
Yeah. Matt, you came from similar consulting background, now kind of running a PE-backed company. You take this question next.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, and not to do another shameless plug for consulting, but the one thing consulting or banking, the one thing it gives you is a controlled environment just to learn the hard skills. Like, coming into one of these businesses, like we're not a huge business, just shy of 40 million. You don't have a lot of resource. Like I don't have an FP&A person. And if I have to turn a deck quickly, right, for a board presentation, somebody's not helping me on that. And I'm lucky that I was, had a lot of reps on a PE ring fence with a manager, with people who are, resourced to train me when I was a consultant to build some of those skills. Same thing with data analysis. Like I learned SQL when I was at Bain, right? That's super helpful for this job because I'm not always going to have a data scientist on staff to help me out. You don't need it, right? Like you can enter these, we hire folks without consulting experience, without banking experience, who might have run a P&L before or been a general manager in an adjacent industry. I'm not saying it's completely necessary, but I feel fortunate that I had those 2 years because it's, you've got a lot of smart driven people around you. You get used to a certain pace, and you've got a lot of people who are just incentivized to train you. It's like finishing school is how I describe consulting. And I think banking operates in a similar way.
Yeah, I'll throw it to you, Steve. Having not been a consultant or a banker yourself, coming from a kind of a general management type background, what your opinion is here?
I think getting an MBA really altered my career path because it expanded my horizon of thinking. I studied construction management, and that's kind of like you only know what you're exposed to or get a chance to get exposed to. So for me, I used the MBA to learn about all sorts of different things, and you just never know. Like many of the other speakers mentioned, you just never know when you're going to need a SQL toolkit. If you don't have it, you might still fumble through getting something together, but you're not going to be as effective. And I think as your career carries on, those little wins compound more and more and more and more and more, and you get more talented the more you have those tools in your tool belt. And I wouldn't be a CEO of $1 billion business if I didn't have the chance to just have some exposure to those things. I'm 42 years old. Nobody would give me this job if I didn't just grind my way here. And I think the MBA was really good for me. Man, if you can get the job in consulting, go learn all you possibly can. If you can get the banking job, go learn as much as you possibly can for as long as you can, and find a role in an organization somewhere to go apply all of your knowledge to and all of your grit to go build something, because you're going to stand out with all of that you built, that you put into those arrows that you put into your quiver.
Yeah, 100%. I'm at this first role, did not have a consulting background, definitely a rare kind of unique role, immediately post MBA. Thankfully, the CEO that I work for was an MD at a bank prior to this, but has definitely asked me for a few things that I fumble through the night on trying to make a board deck, with making pro forma income statements and stuff that I know my friends in consulting are, like I think it was Bryan or Matt. I think Matt, you were saying it gives you kind of those guardrails. Next question, and I think someone in the chat, if you have questions, start putting those in the chat. I'll kind of push those into the panel. But last question for me, once you get into these roles, you're coming from somewhere like consulting that, I think the knock on consultants or bankers is that you don't execute, that you don't have that experience, at a very kind of like, risk of oversimplifying, you come from somewhere that you make a suggestion, you leave, and you don't never know if it ever gets implemented. Obviously that's not, entirely true, but once you get into these roles, what do you see that defines success kind of at, high level, but also just, in terms of skills? You guys have mentioned SQL and, financial modeling and things like that. Maybe I'll start with you, Bryan.
Yeah. So I've been in a bit of a unique spot where I've kind of seen these businesses. I've been lucky enough to see these businesses at running at a $6 million HVAC residential business to kind of where I'm at now, where we're, right around $460 million. So it's been a pretty crazy growth path. But what I've really seen, and these can kind of be bucketed in a few different ways, is you have to be super high EQ and change management expert. I mean, that is what you do every day. They're super heavily, people intensive businesses, and the take orders mentality is something that I battled with getting out of the military, and I think it's something that anyone on this call needs to be super cognizant of as you get these roles. If people don't like you, and I mean like, not respect, they don't like you, they will not work for you, in my experience. I mean, they have to like you. That's different. That's not what you're used to hearing, I think, but it is true. The second thing is just, to use the cliche term, extreme ownership. You cannot let things that you cannot control affect you. You have got to be a master of everything that you can control, and then you can go fight about the other things. But letting small things get in the way of why you're not successful. People generally don't want to hear it, especially investors. They don't have the context. They're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt, at least from what I've seen. And then last and not least, I'll say a willingness to do every part of the business. And that means what I mean by that is get into the weeds. You got to know every single part of the business like it's your own. And you got to be able to have that conversation with that lowest level employee. And that sounds like a bad way to say it, but that person that's on the ground, and have that face-to-face conversation, and be relatable, and then turn around and brief your CEO on the quarterly business review and do it in a thoughtful, intelligent way. So that's the things I've really kind of learned in my time here.
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Bryan. Travis, I'll shoot it to you and kind of, bring it full circle to what I mentioned earlier. Would love to hear your take, kind of sitting at, the fund level. But also, I think people would wonder, like, how much do you get your hands dirty? What's the appropriate level to do that as you get into these roles?
Yeah, look, it's one of the reasons I love corporate carve-outs, but I mean, Bryan hit the nail on the head, right? Take that transcript, post it on your wall, and you're done with the panel as far as I'm concerned. At the end of the day, the people that do well in this space, the people that do well in PE ops, are the consultants that got to the end of the engagement, realized that, it was a dusty PowerPoint, and got really angry about that. The ones who said, maybe there's another study, like, stay in consulting, that's a better place for them. Like, the people who get angry that they couldn't actually go do the thing and make it happen, that's the people who do well in PE ops. And so look, you can get your hands as dirty as you want to. Again, they have to like you, and that's not a joke, right? They really do have to like you. They can and will change your key card access, but if they like you, they will let you get in the company and work with them, right? Like, no one's going to say no to free smart help. And so if you're willing to go do the work, if you're willing to sit on the floor, kind of fix the machine, help optimize the business process, get in the ERP and automate something, they're going to let you do it. And most of the time, that's how the value happens. Because if it were easy, the company would have done it before, for the most part. And so, I think the other thing that really resonates with me that Bryan said, I do not order people. There are 0 orders that I give in my daily job. If I gave an order to a CEO, they would do it, and then the next day they would not pick up the phone. That's just not how this job works. And so at the end of the day, like, I spend a lot of time on the phone with my CEOs talking about what's on their mind, what are the problems they're facing, and then how do I fix that for them, whether it's hiring someone or going and finding a consultant that can help them solve the problem, or maybe changing out a business process, or maybe just removing a reporting requirement that has no value. Most of the time, I'm earning the trust with the CEO in drips so that when there is a big thing, like, hey, our sales team is not performing at the level that we wanted to, talk to me about why that's happening and if we need to make a change. I have that opportunity to have that conversation. So if you want to give orders, like, this is definitely not the career path for you, because I just don't get that opportunity. And candidly, you learn to like it this way, right? You get to kind of see your company succeed without you necessarily having been the guy to do it or turn the wrench. That's okay. It's a lot of fun to watch those companies be successful where maybe they struggled before.
Yeah, Steve, I'll throw it over to you.
Can you remind me the original question? I know I feel like there's so many things I want to say, but I want to also stay tight to what you were looking for.
No, that's fine. Please take it whatever, whatever direction you want to take. It's probably going to be better than, what I'd asked. So more just tactically and kind of high level, what are the things that make your operators, at Kelso succeed? What do you find drive success, and who are the people that you've had to, part ways with or just don't drive value?
I really love all the comments about EQ and the relationships. Giving orders, I'm a civilian, so I don't quite understand how that might work in the military. It makes sense that in kind of that environment that it can work, but man, it's really interesting how influence and relationships is just so big in what we do. And so we've had to establish our own core values to help align people that are ready for that. And so one of our core values is partnership. It's our first core value. And we use that term to align to a lot of things that kind of remind me of EQ or building trust and influence, rather than saying you need to do something, because a lot of people that I work with are already rich. They're the operators that I deal with, they sold their company to us. And how do you influence somebody that's like uber rich, not a couple $1 million, like $50 million rich? And those guys I manage, and my team manages until they're ready to retire, and bring in the next generation of leader. And the next generation of leader, I have to make sure also has that same approach to building trust and respect with the team and the people. So that's a huge deal for us with operators. I don't know if you want me to hit on any of the questions. I know there was one with my name in it, but I'm a big advocate for the build. And in your career, if you get an opportunity somewhere that goes towards the direction of private equity, towards the direction of a high growth business, I just think you're going to have more opportunities. And the greatest opportunity is to be an owner, and be an owner of something on a smaller scale and then build, or start a business, sell it to private equity, or join a business that's small and get more ownership and grow that and sell it to private equity. I think that's just where you can make absolutely the most amount of money, and you can use all the tools as you're building your career to make those jumps. It doesn't have to be just one or two things. So the off-ramp question, or the question about independent sponsoring, it's hard to do right out of MBA school, I think. But if you build over time and you get little bits of experience, you'll be more properly equipped with not only knowledge and experience, but also relationships. And I think that's one of the great things about consulting and investment banking, is you'll probably meet a lot of people that can give you those opportunities if you build the relationships.
Yeah, thanks. Last one over to Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add here. These guys nailed it. Win the people, be gritty, be willing to do anything, and race towards the details in this business, and truly understand the business. I mean, if you're picking up a field service business, get out in the field, plumb, like switch out ceiling lights, switch out ceiling tiles, understand like what your technicians are doing on a daily basis. because all the other things are going to start to make sense. Your invoices will make more sense. Your business processes will make more sense, you know, when you truly understand it. So get into it. The only other thing I'll add is what I've seen, the difference between like a good operator and a stellar operator is understanding what you can get over the line versus what you can't. So when you take over these companies, you just got limited resources, you've got limited time, and you're going to look at companies where literally everything needs to be fixed and you just don't have time to do it. So focus on those one or two levers that will actually move value. That's what separates good from great, in terms of the operators I've observed.
Hey Wyatt, if it's all right with you, man, like I
Yeah.
saw this last question about technology, and I think it ties
Yeah.
into what Matt just said. If I
Yeah.
just put that one real quick, because that one resonates with me a lot. The tech background, with tech, like anything else, it all provides its value in certain ways in these businesses. What kind of hits me with that question is it seems like a lot of efficiencies can you gain through technology. Yes, I'm sure like that's true. What I want to kind of caution people against if they do have tech backgrounds is it's people, process, then technology. These businesses don't have the people up front, first and foremost, a lot of them. If you get into these businesses and you come in with, I want to change the CRM, I want to do this, I want to do that, it will not be met very well. So like find the right time to insert technology. I would not use that as your main way to provide value to these businesses up front. Kind of just spinning off what Matt said there, but I think was relevant.
Yeah.
I'd love to get the
Thank
rest
you.
of the panel's thoughts on that too, if you guys disagreed anyway.
No, if you're
Thanks.
coming in and part of your value creation playbook is new ERP in the first quarter, run.
Yeah,
Like,
there are
get out
basic
of there.
levers that can be pulled, right? For sure.
Right.
So I think, thanks to all the panelists doing those general questions. We've got a lot of specific stuff. Next, like 15 to 20 minutes, panelists, if you're able to jump in, if not, please, do until complete, the UTC. We're going to open rooms with each of the panelists. If you have questions, I think there's a lot of questions about how do you get these jobs, right? How do you become, the panelists that we see here? And probably specifically, how do you get a job at the specific places, where they work, which they, have mentioned kind of doing LDP type stuff. I'll open these rooms. You can feel free to jump in. Panelists, please, feel free to do this for no time if you have to leave, or the next 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, thanks to everyone who attended. We'll do this again next month, probably with a networking fireside chat. We'll keep doing these, every month about new different career fields, and we hope everyone, had value. So I'll open these rooms, and everyone can go and choose whichever one they think, they want to hear from.